Hey guys, Mr. Klein here, and we are going over our last lesson of the chapter on Indian history about the Mauryan and Gupta empires, two great empires in early Indian history, the first two big ones. So let's go ahead and let's get started talking about this. Now, up until the conquest of India by Alexander the Great in the 300s BC, India was divided into several states with no central leader. Because India is so big, it makes sense that you wouldn't have one leader in one empire. Lots of different kingdoms were fighting against each other, but they were all pretty much Hindu. Now, after the Greeks left, a military leader of India by the name of Kandra Gupta Maurya, or Chandragupta would be another way to spell it, but this is the way your textbook uses. Chandragupta Maurya seized control of most of India. In fact, he defeated the Greek king who held on to most of Western India and pushed him out and ended up marrying his daughter. And he created an empire known as the Mauryan Empire, named after him. And it lasted for about 150 years. And so this was the area where the Maurya dynasty set up, and this is where he pushed out the Greeks out of this area, and he expanded. Chandragupta Maurya spread his empire to form this area. And so he ruled for about 150 years. The government of the Chandragupta was very complex and very cruel. He was a military man. He distrusted enemies. He saw enemies everywhere, and so tried his best in order to rule India with an iron fist. It included a huge army and many spies, and as a result, the population was heavily taxed, and they did not like that. Now, over the years, though, Maurya changed his ways, and he became a sect of a different kind of off-branch religion of Hinduism called Jainism that's like uh, extremely pacifist. In other words, they don't like fighting and stuff like that. He kind of changed his ways and let his son take over, and he became a devout Jainist. And in fact, Chandragupta Maurya spent the last years of his life walking around naked, telling people not to fight. Yes, that is completely correct. But I'll spare you the details. But that was part of the Jain idea of not wanting to hurt anything or anything like that. But he spent his last days going around speaking peace instead of war. Now, Chandragupta's grandson was named Asoka, and Asoka assumed the throne, and he ruled with even more cruelty than his grandfather. And here's a stone relief of Asoka. His face was damaged, but Asoka was considered to be probably the greatest ruler of the Mauryan Empire. He made the army even larger. He took on the Mauryan Empire's greatest enemies and defeated them, killing hundreds of thousands of people. But one day, according to legend, he became tired of war and converted to Buddhism. That he saw suffering everywhere, and he realized that the teachings of the Buddha were correct, and that perhaps instead of fighting and killing people and causing suffering, he should try and reduce suffering. And so this caused a complete change in the Mauryan dynasty. Instead of pushing and expanding due to war, tried doing it due to peace. And Asoka considered himself the father of the Indian people and to care for them. And he wanted to spread the good news of Buddhism. And he sent Buddhist missionaries to neighboring kingdoms. And he spent the remainder of his rule trying to improve the lives of his people. We even have historical accounts of Buddhist missionaries sent by Asoka all the way into Greece to talk with the Greek people and Greek leaders. And while they listened to them, of course, they didn't convert to Buddhism. Now, after Asoka died, people who did not like the Mauryan Empire, countries around him, because even though he preached peace, he still had a large army to protect the country. After Asoka died, people in these neighboring kingdoms saw weakness, and the kingdom quickly fell. And so India was divided for the next 500 years between these small kingdoms, just like before. Because after all, unless you have a big, strong king, you're not going to rule a big, huge country like India. Now, one of the legacies of the Mauryan Empire was the spread of Buddhism at the expense of Hinduism. And so interestingly, even though now Hinduism is about 80% of the population of India's religion of choice, at this time in history, around the time that Jesus was born and stuff like that, Hinduism was actually on the wane. Not a lot of people worshipped Hinduism, but rather most people were Buddhist. And that kind of went on until the second dynasty we're going to talk about, which are the Guptas. And so after those 500 years, India was united again under the Gupta Dynasty. It was a group of rulers who were devout Hindus. And their empire kind of was the same area. And I'll go back to the picture. They ruled all of this from around 320 to 600 AD. So, during the later times of the Roman Empire and stuff, was when this was the Guptas ruled. And the Guptas encouraged the revival of Hindu traditions and Hindu writings. They said that people should be Hindus because it was the traditional Indian way and stuff like that. But even though they were Hindus, they believed that people should worship as they believe. So as a result, Buddhism stayed prevalent, but Hinduism began growing from here up until where it's at today. And ancient Indian civilization reached its height under the rule of Kandra Gupta II. Now, the name's a little bit different. They're not related to Kandra Gupta Maurya. And I was looking for some pictures of Kandra Gupta, and I couldn't really find one, but he's considered to be the greatest ruler. Kandra Gupta II strengthened the country's borders, kept enemies at bay, and encouraged peace inside the country. It grew the arts, the literature, and religion. So money was spent for religious temples, Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, things like that, so people could worship right and do as they please. Now, because they were Hindus, they were very firm believers in the caste system, which, remember, the Buddhists opposed the caste system because they said everyone could work to reach nirvana, whereas the Hindus say the caste system is good because it's a person's stage in life as they seek to reach Brahman, and where they're at in their life depends on their karma from the previous lives. And they also saw it as a way to keep the country stable, whereas people wouldn't be arguing and fighting over each other. Everyone knew their place. So if you were a Sudra, you would be a Sudra. If you were a Brahmin, you were a Brahmin. You knew your place and you didn't try to push anywhere like that. Now, as a result of this growth in the caste system, the rights of many people, including women and the lower castes, were reduced. And the Guptas kept India united for about 300 years till an army called the Huns drained the empire of its resources. The Huns came from Central Asia, and later on we'll see that the Huns actually moved from India westward and attacked the Roman Empire. And we'll talk about this later this year. So the same Huns that you'll hear about later, this is the first time we're mentioning them. They fought and fought and fought against the Guptas, and the Guptas spent so much money trying to keep the empire afloat and from letting the Huns conquering them, they kind of went broke. And the Gupta rulers ended up falling out of power. And as a result, India collapsed into a patchwork of small states where it stayed pretty much until today, without some brief interludes later on with Muslim rulers. And so once again, this is the Gupta Empire's largest size. These were other kingdoms here. And one of the interesting things from the Gupta Empire is the Iron Pillar of Delhi. This iron pillar, as you can see, there's almost no rust on it. It's actually almost 2,000 years old, and it has symbols and writings on it in order to talk about Vishnu, the Hindu god of the protector. Because remember that the Guptas were rulers who were devout Hindus. And so it's been right there in Delhi, and it hasn't rusted for nearly 2,000 years. And that's because of the way it was made, which shows the high technology of the Indian rulers. So this is about it for the lesson and for the chapter. Remember, there's two major empires. There was the Mauryans, which kicked out the Greeks with Alexander the Great. And it was founded by this guy, Kandra Gupta Maurya. He was the founder. He was a very cruel ruler, very strong military man. He renounced war and, yes, walked around naked, talking about peace and nonviolence. And he gave his empire to his grandson Asoka, who fought even greater, and like his grandfather, ended up getting rid of violence, but instead ruled as a Buddhist and ruled in peace and tried to improve the lives of others. They were Buddhist by religion, whereas the Guptas, who ruled after them, were Hindus and caused a revival of the caste system and things like that. And they ruled at the height under Kandra Gupta II, who was a ruler that wasn't related to the Mauryans, but had a name that was similar. And apart from these two empires, India, because it's so big, was split into lots of different kingdoms that fought each other throughout history. So there you go. That's the chapter on India. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and thanks for watching.
जान पहचान हो जीना आसान हो जान पहचान हो जीना आसान हो दिल को चुराने वालों आंख न चुराओ नाम तो बताओ जान पहचान हो जीना आसान हो